Alright, so here we are for another episode of RC Pit Stop, and today we have the HoBao Hyper MT Sport Plus. I'm going to be changing out some things on this guy. We're going to be doing some upgrades and doing some repairs as well. One of the things I'm going to be changing out is going to be the body. As you can see, this guy here has had its fair share of abuse. It's all pretty well damaged, cracked, broken. So yeah, this guy's going to go, so we're going to get rid of him. Get rid of that. Another problem that I had with this truck, I was actually running it off camera a little while ago, and I wasn't doing anything outrageous with it. I was just running the truck, and I noticed that there was a bit of a clicking sound. Sure enough, after a couple more minutes, I had lost complete drive to the truck, and the reason for that, as you can see here, the spur gear is completely gone. There's no teeth left on it at all. So we're going to be changing that guy out. Now, there are a couple of options for spurs that you can get. First off, you can get a standard spur, just like the one that came in the truck, which is this one here. I'm not going to be putting that one on. There is another option, which is a pretty good one, which is the Cnc Spur Gear. You can see it's a little bit different in the way that it looks. This should be a much stronger steel, or I'm pretty sure it's steel, it wouldn't be aluminium. So this will be a much better option, but I'm still not going to be using this one. At least I don't think I am, because I've actually decided to go with this one, which HoBao are calling a Tourque limiter set, which is essentially like a snipper clutch, I guess. So that is what I'm going to use on this one. Hopefully I can figure out how to install it. It has instructions on there as well, and that way, you know, when the truck does land, if it's you know, under power, it's not going to put a lot of pressure on my spur. It's going to allow a little bit of slip, and yeah, hopefully I won't have any issues with spur gears in the future. Now, one of the cool things that HoBao have done with this particular truck is they've actually improved the material of the chassis and made it a much stronger chassis. Unlike the Hyper MT that I had from Offner, which bent the chassis pretty much on its first run, this one has been holding up very, very well. However, for extra assurance, I am still going to be installing a chassis brace. So this guy is going to go under here, right where the servo is. That's where it goes, right underneath there. And that should offer a little bit of extra stiffness to the chassis and prevent any sort of bad landing from, you know, causing the chassis any damage. Now, when I finished my first run of the truck, both on 4S and 6S, which I have those videos up on my channel, it wasn't until I got home that I realized that I had 3 out of my 4 drive shafts were actually all bent. One of them was actually really badly bent to the point where it was rubbing on the A-arms every time it went a full rotation. So I've got some fresh drive shafts to go in. These are supposed to be some heavy duty ones. They are universal, as you can see there, and we're going to be installing these and replacing the ones that, well, were a little bit buckled. I did straighten them out. You can straighten these out, but you know, once they're bent, they always have a little bit of a bend in them. It's really hard to get them 100% straight. I'm also going to be swapping out my steering servo because I do find that the steering servo on this is a little bit weak for this truck. It needs something a little bit better, but I didn't want to spend too much on it. I wanted to try something new and something different. And as you can see, I've got this servo. Now this I actually picked up from Banggood. These servos are about $25 US from memory, somewhere around there. Now you can't really see it because this sticker's on here, so I'm going to open this up and I'm going to show you the specs of this guy because it's actually quite impressive given the money that it is. So I'm going to take this out here very quickly, and we'll take this bit of paper out and I'll actually show you here. So it works on anywhere from 6 volts to 8.4 volts, and it has a speed of 0.12 seconds to 0.1 seconds, obviously depending on the voltage. And even on 6 volts, it's got a rating of 25 kilograms, and on 8.4 volts, it has a rating of 32.3 kilograms. So that is actually really impressive for something this cheap. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this guy is going to perform in here, because for a servo to be worth this much and to have these sort of specs, being a high voltage servo, hey, you know, that's worth a try at least, especially for the money that it is. Now, one of the things that I really would like HoBao to do in the future is include a wheelie bar with this truck. I had to get one for my Offner version as well, and of course I've got one here for this truck because Well, even on 4S, I mean, this thing pops wheelies really easy, and on 6S it was just insane. It was flipping on its roof quite very easily, in fact, and hence the reason why I had to swap out the body. So hopefully this one will give it a little bit of protection and allow me to do some wheelies without flipping it on its roof. And last but not least, I'm going to be just swapping out some of the wheel nuts that I have. I've got two options here. I've got a bronze color and then I've got a gold color. Now, the gold is okay, but I think I might leave this one for when I do a custom body for this truck. I may use a little bit of gold in it and then use these wheel nuts on there just to really tie everything in. But for the moment, I'm going to go with the bronze, and that will be what's going to go on this truck. There's nothing wrong with the stock wheel nuts. They're exactly the same, the ones that I just showed you. But I just want to change the look of it a little bit and just do something different. So let's get to work. I'm going to start off with the spur gear, see if I can fix that as quickly as possible, and then come back and show you my progress. Alright, so I just thought I'll take a couple of seconds here to show you the inside of this transmission. For those of you who are wondering what this guy looks like, that is it there. So you can see it's got very solid gearing right through. This guy goes over here, if my memory serves me correct. It sits in there like so, and then your spur gear kind of sits at the end here, and that is essentially how this works. So there's no center diff or anything like that, which is why this truck is so prone to popping wheelies and why it really needs a wheelie bar. But essentially there are the internal gears, transfer gears that are in the middle of the truck. Now you can see I've taken the battery trays off, and I've also had to kind of dismount my receiver box in order to get this guy out. Thankfully I have my trusty little electric tool here, which makes light work of removing the screws. Otherwise, yeah, my arms would probably be a little bit sore. Anyway, I'm going to keep going now and show you the next step in the progress. Alright, so there we go, all done. My spur gear is now mounted on with the slipper clutch assembly. So the clutch actually sits behind here, and then there are these sort of like spring washers that go in there as opposed to an actual spring that we're sort of used to seeing, and that provides you tension for your slipper clutch. So hopefully this will hold up okay and give me a little bit of slip whenever I have, you know, a bit of a hard landing or when there's too much torque going through the drive line. Hopefully this guy will give out a little bit of power. Now, just in case you guys are curious, there is a cross pin that goes all the way through these Outdrive cups that you see there. So it's actually threaded in from this end and comes out the other end, and that is my transmission done. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this guy back into the truck, and then I'm going to get stuck on the servo. I'm going to get started on the servo, I should say. Okay, so my servo is now in. That's installed in there, and I think you'd be pretty pleased with the results once you see this guy working. I was going to move on to my chassis brace, but I kind of wanted to do the drive shafts first. I don't know why, I just decided to do the drive shafts. Now this is the rear dog bone, and as you can probably tell, that's got a bit of a bend in it. So it's not exactly straight. I am able to bend these almost by hand. If you put enough force in them, you can bend them a little bit. So these are actually 4mm thick, and they're obviously a little bit soft. So if you're going to really beat up on this truck, just be mindful that these might actually bend on you. Now the new ones are 5mm thick, so and there's a considerable difference in quality, and you can feel that this is going to be a much more durable drive shaft once it gets installed into the truck. Now, there is one problem that I came across, and that is the little top bit here. If I can get the camera to focus in on this, would be fantastic. There we go. You can see that the thicker drive shaft actually has a little kind of like a bigger ball on there, which means that it's not going to fit into your existing Outdrive cups. Now thankfully HoBao did send me out different Outdrive cups, and I was kind of wondering, why did they send me these? I didn't have these broken, so I was a bit confused as to why they sent them to me. Well, as it turns out, you need to install these guys in order for this to fit in here. So as it turns out, what I thought was going to be a fairly quick swap over and a fairly quick video is not going to be the case at all, because now I have to get into the diffs. I have to pull apart the rear end and I've got to pull apart the front end to be able to install these guys so that I can install these guys. Bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting to do that, but it is what it is, and hopefully I'm only going to have to do this once, and I won't have to worry about, you know, bent drive shafts again. So I'm going to grease up my elbows a little bit here, and I'm really going to dig into this truck because so far everything has been very, very good, and I do highly recommend you invest in something like this because one of the cool things that's been going on so far while I've been working on the truck is A, they use a lot of the same size screws, which is great, and B, the screw heads only use like a 2mm hex driver. So with 2mm hex driver, you can pretty much do exactly what I've just done, which is to swap out your servo. I fixed the spur gear, took out the battery trays, did all this stuff, all with just a 2mm hex driver. And I couldn't really mess up the screws because they were all the same size. So well done HoBao on doing that, because that makes life very, very easy for everybody. If you have the same size screws, which means you're not going to get mixed up, and you'll also have the same size hex on there. So now comes the hard part, which is of course to dig into these diffs. So away we go. And there we go, all done. Finally, everything is finished. Now, I was going to show you kind of the diffs and all of this sort of stuff, but I was in a bit of a zone. Once I did the rear one, I jumped straight to the front one, and I did that. And I kind of knew what needed to be disassembled and whatnot, and I just kept going. That's really how it all unfolded. So sorry I didn't get to show you the diffs and all that, but I can tell you that the diffs had some very thick grease in them. But of course I ended up putting a little bit of oil, so I cleaned out the grease and everything and put 100 weight diff oil in there, both front and rear, and they feel kind of nice. Hopefully they'll perform very well. So we'll see how that works out. Wheelie bar is on, as you can see back here. The wheelie bar is one of the easiest things to put on this truck, believe it or not. There's really 4 screws. They provide some additional screws for you to screw it on. Real nice and easy to put this guy on here. So I've put it on the lowest setting, and that's where it's going to stay. Brand new body from HoBao as well. I've decided to stick with the stock one for now. I do have a clear one, which I may paint up in the future, but for now I'll stick with the original one just to finish running the truck. And one thing I will say, you know, when I went to put this body on, it wasn't fitting on the truck properly, and I'm like, what's going on? Because the body comes pre-drilled, so it should fit straight on. Well, as it turns out, you might be able to see it here, these little dimples, hopefully the camera will focus in on this, here you go. So you can see the little dimple there, that's where it's supposed to be drilled, and it was drilled up here. So I've kind of had to sort of make the holes a little bit oval, both front and rear. I may need to do a little bit more, to be honest, because it's still a very tight fit, but hey, at least it fits on the truck. The diff swap over, you know, the Outdrive cups, yes, that did take a little bit of time. There is a bit of a knack to getting the diff cover off. You will need to, of course, take out the rear bumper, and the same thing goes for the front bumper. You then unscrew the diff from underneath, and you just have to very carefully and put in a bit of force at the same time, kind of pull the diff cover off whilst the chassis is still attached, because otherwise you have to kind of rip everything out of the chassis, and it's a big task to do that. You just want that rear cover off, and I managed to do it just by kind of flexing everything and sort of opening it up and then sliding it out. So that does take a little bit of time and a bit of effort. The chassis brace, as you can see, has been mounted on here. This is a really nice, tight, snug fit. You do need to be persistent with it. I was almost to the point where I was going to like maybe sand down the chassis brace, but I didn't want to do that because it's painted all the way around, and I thought, well, maybe if I sand down the paint, you know, that could create problems later on down the line. I didn't want to do that, so you just have to kind of be a little bit careful, be real persistent, push it in, and then slide it into position and screw it on, and away you go. The chassis brace is now in place, and that's all good to go. The spur gear, as I showed you earlier, that's in there, nice. I'm actually running a 17-tooth pinion now because I don't know what I did with the 16-tooth pinion. I took it out and, well, I can't find it. So I've found a 17-tooth. I've put that in there. I also put some fresh shock oil in my shocks. They felt a little bit flimsy from all the bashing and everything else. So I've gone with the 1100 CST shock oil, both front and rear. And hopefully that will, that will give me a little bit more dampening. It does feel quite nice, and I'm hoping that, they perform well enough. Worst case scenario, if it's a bit too dense, I may need to go down to like maybe 1000 or even 900 CST, because I've been using these Trackstar Hobby King oils recently, and I'm really liking them. But I've only got limited numbers, so I've got some more on order. Hopefully they'll be here in another week or so, and yeah, I'll be able to maybe toy around with it a little bit more. Now, because I've gone to 17 tooth pinion, I'm not really planning on running this truck on 6S all that often, especially with these brand new tires from Proline, the Badlands Max 38, which are the new version of their Badlands. These turned up as well, and I can't wait to test them out and see how they hold up. They look fantastic, they feel really grippy. They do balloon quite a bit though, so I'm hoping it doesn't create too much of a problem. But like I said, I'm going to be running this mainly on 4S because I think that 4S on this truck is ample. This brushless system is very, very powerful. And from the runs that I've had with it, 6S is when you really want to go loopy and just completely out of control. Especially now I've got one tooth up on the pinion. It's going to be really hard to control on 6S. So I'll stick to 4S for now. And now, finally, I'm going to show you the servo working. So I've got this new radio from Futaba, which is the T3PV. I don't know if you guys have seen this one around, but this is a really nice, neat little remote. So we'll power this guy up, and I've actually connected up my Hyper to this. So I've been sort of running the Hyper a little bit with this radio just to get a feel for it. And I'm hoping to kind of showcase the radio in a later episode, in the later videos. So here we are, steering. So that is using the 25, I think it was $25 US steering servo. I mean, that is pretty impressive. One thing that I did try to do as well, and I couldn't do, was actually change the BEC voltage on the ESC to a higher voltage, but it's kind of stuck on 6 volts. So it doesn't have the option for me to do that with the program card. It's a bit unfortunate. I was kind of hoping that it would have that option on there, but I couldn't, unfortunately, I couldn't change the BEC voltage. And to be honest, I don't even know if it's set on 6 volts or 7.2. It may be 7.2 because with the speed that this has, and being able to turn massive tires like this on a rubber mat while stationary and not even being phased, I mean, that is centering pretty well. I'm really impressed with this steering servo. I think I may need to get some more for my some of my other cars. So we'll see what the future holds. Now, of course, it looks great here, but who knows? Maybe with a few hard landings and a few runs down the line, it may fail. I don't know. It's a bit hard to. It's a bit early to call to say that this is, the deal of the century on a steering servo for a monster truck, but so far it's looking pretty good. Well, there we are. My Hyper MT Sport Plus is now finally ready for another bash. It's got new tires, brand new body. It finally has a wheelie bar, chassis brace, which means I can be a little bit more confident in case of the odd bad landing. I know that the chassis is not going to cop too much of a hiding. I've gone up a tooth on the pinion, which should give me a little bit more speed. It's not going to be too much. And of course, I've got some fresh rubber on here from Proline, which I'm very much looking forward to seeing how these tires hold up at the BMX track, on gravel, and of course on grass. That is it for this episode of RC Pit Stop. Thank you all very much for watching. Please be sure to check the video description. I'll have model numbers in there for all the upgrades and all the drive shafts and all the bits and pieces that I've kind of changed on this truck, as well as a link to the Proline Badlands in case you want to get some yourself. Don't forget to hit the like button before you go, subscribe if you're new, and of course check out my Facebook page as well and give that a like, because I'm always posting up sneaky photos ahead of time from what goes on here on YouTube. That's it from me, and I'll speak to you next time.